want to share with you my lentil soup recipe and talk about food safety. First, I'll share my recipe. It already smells good. It has onions, carrots, tomatoes, a little bit of garlic, fresh garlic, corn, and the lentils. I chop everything up, put a little bit of oil, salt, and I put everything in first, the dry ingredients, and then I added 5 cups of water for 1.5 cups of lentils. 1.5 cups of lentils. Okay, so that's my recipe. Oh, and I still need to make the rice. I'll make it while I do this video. Excuse me. Okay, so food safety. I want to talk about food safety. I had an aunt who married a member of the military forces, American military forces. She was Colombian and she moved here to live in Washington. She worked for a doctor, and then she met a very nice gentleman who worked in the military. They fell in love, they got married, and they had a beautiful baby boy, a gorgeous baby boy. She started experiencing a lot of stress, like nervousness. She started getting anxious, and the family and her husband, when she had her second baby, her husband said that they were not going to be able to take care of the baby and they were going to have to give him up for adoption. And that was devastating for my aunt because we come from a very close-knit family who values kids a lot, appreciates kids, loves kids. Like, we not value us and like they have no price. They do. A kid comes above everything and everyone else. She was devastated. She started experiencing a lot of stress and nervousness, and he said that they were not going to be able to raise both their kids and they had to give one up for adoption, and that was devastating for her. And after that, she experienced even more stress to the point where she ended up in a mental institution, and her husband felt she was getting tortured at that mental institution, and he felt the best thing he could do was get her out of there, and he sent her back to Colombia. And her family in Colombia helped her and found her a mental clinic in Colombia, which mental clinics are not the best place. But she spent the last years of her life there away from her son. It must have been excruciatingly difficult and cruel for her to live that way, to have a frustrated marriage, to have to give up a child for adoption, to have to live away from her son and live in Colombia in a mental clinic. That was just tragic. I had heard her story and I met her. We used to visit her sometimes on the weekends, so I used to know she was very religious. She kind of found refuge in religion in a way that wasn't healthy, but they tried to do that to people. They tried to do that to me, but I'm not very religious. So she had a very baby Einstein. So she became too religious, and I guess that's the only thing that gave her hope and something to do. She would pray, she would read the Bible, and she got herself immersed in religion. I guess that's the only thing she could cling on to because she didn't have anyone else. Very tragic, very sad. When we moved to live here, one of her concerns used to be food safety. Like, she would always be afraid that they were going to poison her food, and our family used to think like, no, that's because she has mental issues. You know, she can't cope with stress. She just has mental issues. Why would they put something in the food that doesn't happen? So our family never really paid much attention to that issue. When we moved here and in Colombia, we used to go to restaurants all the time. We used to go to really nice restaurants every weekend. We used to go to restaurants here all the time. I used to go out with my friends. I used to go with my family. Then when I moved to Chicago to work in the news, when I moved to Chicago to work in the news industry, I also used to go to restaurants, used to go with friends. I used to drink Starbucks every morning it was in downtown Chicago. I worked in a beautiful building, the Time and Life building, from Time and Life magazine, but it wasn't Time and Life. Oh, I guess the offices were still there also, but Univision Customs offices were there. So I used to buy coffee across the street at the Starbucks and go work at the office every day. I never thought much of it. I was never afraid of getting poisoned or my food getting sabotaged. I did not think that was, Einstein baby, no. I did not think that was an issue. I never worried about it. I never thought it was an issue. I didn't think it happened. And I never had an issue. I used to drink my Starbucks every morning. Einstein baby, please. Einstein. Baby, come on. I never had an issue. When I resigned from my job as a journalist, and Einstein baby, please. When I resigned, Einstein baby, I'm going to have to go carry him. When I resigned from my job at Univision and I criticized corruption and I didn't like how things were going, and I started encountering a lot of stress and threats and harassment, I started encountering issues with food safety that worried me and started making me realize, like, well, maybe my aunt was right. Maybe she didn't have mental issues. Maybe it is true that sometimes they poison food. Maybe sometimes they sabotage food. So when I moved here, I went to a Starbucks. Like I used to go to Starbucks often. This time I didn't go often, but I went once to a Starbucks at a mall. I think it was Sawgrass Mills. And I saw someone getting close to the coffee that I was buying with pills, things like for medication. And I got very worried, like thinking, oh my gosh, are they putting something in my coffee? So I got the coffee. I did not confront them at that time because I wasn't sure. I was like, is it possible? So I just threw away the coffee and left. And then a few months later, I went to a restaurant to celebrate with my son. It was an awards day at school, and I went to celebrate with my son. And I went with my son to an Italian restaurant, and we ordered pasta. Usually it was delicious. I had eaten it before, but then that day it tasted really weird, like bitter, and it tasted weird. And I thought, like, there is something going on with this pasta. Like, it tastes weird. But I was so hungry, I didn't think much of it, and I just ate it, and we went home. The next day, I woke up with trouble going to the bathroom. Like, I could not. I'm sorry, for being so graphic, but I guess I should tell you how it is. But I felt like I couldn't pee. I tried peeing, and it felt like it was swollen. I couldn't pee, and I saw on my Twitter a graphic of something like a bubble and a little thing, like drip, drip, drip. And I felt like, oh my gosh, did they cause this to me on purpose? Like, not only did they cause it to me physically, but now mentally they're insinuating it to me in my Twitter. And I felt very concerned. And I started realizing, like, well, maybe it's not a good idea to eat out because I guess they sabotage food, I suspect. And so I kept telling my son and his dad, let's not eat out, let's cook at home, And I would always cook for my son at home, I would always cook. And I became very, focused in buying fresh, healthy food, making sure it's clean, not toxic, and then preparing it at home in a healthy way. And delicious, it's not only super duper healthy to where, it doesn't even taste good. I try to make it taste good. And I use a little bit of everything. I use meat, I use fish, I use chicken, I use oil, I butter, cream, I use a little bit of everything, but I try to diversify it so it doesn't accumulate toxins, but we can eat a little bit of everything. So it's healthy, but not like vegan or something obsessively healthy where it doesn't taste good or has no salt. It has a little bit of everything. So my son and his dad were like, no, you have issues, why do you worry? And I kept telling him, I had an aunt who had these concerns, and the family didn't think much of it. And in fact, it's really sad because they kind of made a joke out of it in Colombia. She was a very decent woman. She only met her husband, an American military member of the military, and she was very devoted to her husband and her son. And then she was devastated when they had to give up their second son for adoption. And I'm trying to remember if I already mentioned this. I think I may have. And in Colombia, it's kind of like a joke. There's a porno star with the same name as my aunt. It's kind of like a joke, like to insult us or to, it's very sad how political and corrupt economic interests use and abuse people and harass and insult. And So there's a porno star with her name, and she was the farthest thing away from a porno star. She was like, and even after that, she became like a nun. She became like obsessed with religion, which wasn't healthy either. But she had a tragic life. She just had a tragic life. And all of us in the family knew, but we didn't really know why. Like, we didn't know how it happened. So then, after I lived in Chicago for 17 years and resigning from my job, and weird things started happening to me, I became curious. I'm like, oh my gosh, so my aunt was complaining about the deep state, like how they harass her, because I see like people drive with cars that have certain writing on the license plate, or they have t-shirts with certain writing, or people wearing certain colors, or something. I get a message on my Twitter or my Facebook or to my phone from other sources, and I started realizing like my aunt was encountering psychological warfare. And I don't know if it was because she was Colombian and, you know, there's a history with the drug war, but none of us in our family were involved. Well, at least she wasn't involved at all. I heard of an uncle once who maybe got in trouble, but we were not. My dad was not, I was not, my sister was not, my mom was not, my aunt was not. So I can't like say all my whole family. I wish I could, but I think there was an uncle who at some point had a little bit of. But Donald Trump has been super involved with drugs, like money laundering, casinos, and human trafficking. And my uncle apparently had a little issue compared to like the types of issues that people hear, like the Clintons and Trumps and all that. But anyway, she was always concerned about food sabotage, and she would worry that people were going to poison her food. After those incidents, I started getting worried. I used to buy food out like it's not an issue. So after that, after knowing what my aunt went through, and after experiencing myself, after blowing the whistle on corruption as a journalist, then I realized like maybe she was telling the truth, and maybe there is a system designed to harass and sabotage and influence people and make them nuts, kind of. In the wrong way, because it's not the problem is not here. The problem is out there with what the system does to people. You go to a restaurant and you can't enjoy a nice meal because you fear they're going to poison it, and they actually do put something in there that causes you a rash or an aneurysm or a heart attack, and it's not because of health. It's not because like high cholesterol or high blood pressure. It's not something related to the regular healthy nutrition, but something additional that causes this reaction. It's wrong, and it has to stop. It happens in Russia. There was a politician whose skin got destroyed. He was poisoned, and I don't know if it was from his food or he touched something or someone, like they destroyed his skin with a poison. And it happened in Korea, and it has happened in Colombia. And so now when I go to restaurants, I worry about food safety, and I only go I try to go to buffet restaurants where the food is served, and you go and grab it. It's not like you sit there and wait for them to go prepare it and bring it to you. So it doesn't give a chance to anyone to put something in there. And I met someone I was at the pool, and someone who works at the Capitol Grill, the delicious steakhouse, came and started speaking with me, and I asked him, I said, I have this concern about food safety because I had an aunt who complained about food safety. And then I started experiencing weird things after resigning from my job as a journalist, and I'm wondering if they sabotage people's food. Like, what type of safety measures do you take, safety precautions? And he told me, well, we make sure people don't bring anything in. I'm like, do you have cameras? Like, do you have a way of verifying that the food that they prepare, whether out in the open or in the kitchen? Obviously in the open it's easier. Like, I like to go to sushi places or buffets where I can see how they prepare my food, or Benihana where they bring it to your table and you see how they prepare it right in front of you, so you know what goes into your food. So you feel confident. And heat tends to kill viruses and bacteria. So if you see someone heating something up in front of you, you can kind of trust that it's healthy food. There are poisons that not even heat can get rid of, and it can cause death. And when you hear of people dying, like you see in the news, someone's like a famous person dying or a politician getting sick, and you wonder, like, were they sabotaged? Did someone put something in their food? Did someone cause that? And I want to make sure that the food industry, both the one we buy at the grocery store and the ingredients that are utilized to make it, don't make us sick. And I also want to make sure that there is no food sabotage. Like, if you go to Starbucks and you order coffee, they need to make sure they have cameras and have very responsible employees who are morally and ethically strong and responsible and wouldn't be the type of people who maybe would be bribed into putting something into someone's food. They wouldn't spike someone's food with something that can harm them or hurt them. And it already happens at bars where people worry about the rape drug, where people get put stuff in their drinks and then they wake up and they don't even know what happened. And so I worry about that, and I wish they would improve safety in the restaurants so people's food is safe and it doesn't get sabotaged. Like with cameras and hiring personnel that would never do that, and making sure you take precautions to, yes, make sure they don't bring anything in. There's no way to sneak in any type of poison or thing to put in the food, and that the cameras and the personnel supervising the kitchen can ensure that people are not going to be poisoned or their food is not going to be sabotaged in any way, shape, or form. And it's very important, I think, for the restaurant industry to come forward with new guidelines to ensure consumers that we can be safe when we go out there and we don't have to fear that we're going to get sabotaged or poisoned. You hear a lot of too many, and I think they target people for different reasons. Like, it doesn't have to be someone famous. What if it's a lawyer doing a very complicated case and the opposing side goes and asks someone at a restaurant that they know the person likes to go to and bribes the person who works there to put something so the lawyer gets sick? Or a doctor who treats someone important? Or a journalist? Or a politician? Or just people in general. Someone whose husband wants the woman dead and goes bribes the waiter to poison her food. So we need to make sure that the restaurants are protected from any type of sabotage, and that their employees and the supervisors make sure that none of that happens, none of that goes on in the food industry. Because I think that if they ensure it, I wouldn't be as